Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar at this very special moment. And we deeply thank you for joining us today. Of course, from the Asia-Europe People's Forum, we welcome you. We also join in solidarity with different struggles that we have in different parts of the world. But today, we're going to focus on South Korea and the special moments, the challenges that they have, and their visions for the future, I hope. That could be, and possibly maybe a call to action towards the end. So, Kris, yeah, I forgot to introduce myself again. This is Corazon Fabros. I'm from the Philippines. I'm with the working group on peace and security at Asia-Europe People's Forum, and also I'm with the International Peace Bureau. So, Kris?
Thanks, Cora. Yeah, nice to see you all here. I'm Kris Vanslambrouk from 1111 based in Brussels, Belgium. Also an active member of AEPF, and AEPF is the Asia-Europe People's Forum. It's been a long time, say, network of, say, activists that are working on peace, on climate justice, on food sovereignty. So from various topics, we are coming together to discuss global issues. And in fact, we are also here today to discuss more about say Korea, because we think the topic of Korea is also very much linked with the geopolitics. So we hope to, after this webinar, we understand better also the context in Korea, and how it can also impact, say, the new year that is very close, and 2025 is very close. And we are sure that, let's say, this issue will not be solved by the end of this year, so it will continue. But for that, we invited two, say, important speakers. And we're very glad that Kaya VEREIDE and Francis Dimon Lee are here present today. So welcome. Let me start with Mr. and I should in fact say Professor Francis Dion Lee. He is now currently retired, but still very active. And one of his, let's say, can I say hobbies, is being active in the group Peace Momo. Can you explain very briefly what Peace Momo is doing as an organization?
Peace Momo is a group of peace builders based in Seoul, South Korea. We specialize in training for peace building capacity, conflict resolution, and we help teachers in schools to do such a training. And we also do policy and other campaigns regarding peace building in Korea, in Asia, etc.
Okay, so that's, I mean, given the conflict-ridden, say, situation that we are in, and so many conflicts all over the world, I think peace building should be really on top of the agenda of education and many other, say, topics that are of public interest. So we're very glad that you are here amongst us. And I give you 10-15 minutes to say paint a bit a picture of the context in Korea, and how, I mean, what is the reason actually that we are here discussing this topic at this moment in time? So please, you have the floor, Francis.
Thank you, Cora, and thank you, Kris. And I'd like to thank Asia-Europe People's Forum for organizing this special session on South Korea, especially with regard to the recent self-coup of Yoon Suk-yeol faction of the government. He no longer represents the government because now he's in the impeachment process. And I'd like to speak some of the progress of this case the coup and the martial law and the people's resistance protest. And then I'd like to spend a few minutes on the possible impact to the future of the peninsula, Northeast Asia, and possibly to larger global politics. So I will use my PowerPoint and try to be as brief as possible to fit into the 15 minutes limit. It happened on December 3rd, and I think this date will become more and more important to many people. And it was 10:28 p.m. that suddenly, out of nowhere, nobody expected this seriously. President Yoon makes a special address through TV to the whole nation and declares martial law. And as you know, South Korea didn't experience any public unrest or chaos or crisis of war or any military clashes between North Korea and South Korea. So really this came out of nothing. And this came very late. Some people were sleeping and when they woke up next morning, everything was kind of revolving fast track. So I saw this news around 10:40, and then about the same time later I learned that MPs, parliamentarians, they were rushing to the National Assembly building, and their staff were rushing, and other people were rushing, and it happens that some colleagues in Peace Momo decided to rush to the National Assembly. They sent messages, and I thought, I immediately thought, because I'm from the generation of 1980 Gwangju massacre of Chun Doo-hwan's coup and killing. I immediately imagined the bloodshed happening in downtown Seoul. I almost heard gun shooting in my ear when this news was going around. So I jumped into the taxi and I ran to the National Assembly. When I arrived there around 11:30, it was already tense. The police took the decision of illegal blockade of the National Assembly. By law, they are not supposed to do that. So they are blocking MPs entering into the compound, and they are blocking citizens. And then martial law commander announces a proclamation, which was really deadly because the number one of this proclamation, this order came from the military. Number one was to halt all functions of the parliament, national and local, and make illegal all activities of assembly and expression, media, writing, and gathering. So 11:27, all democratic rights were halted by the martial law, but still people were coming in, and in 1 hour or so, the protesters grew to the number of 5,000. And then helicopters were flying in very low, and obviously these were combat helicopters of top class. And later we learned that these troops who stormed into the National Assembly, they were the top brand of the entire military, and they specialize in penetration and decapitation operation into North Korea. So these combat forces stormed into the National Assembly. But luckily, the MPs were uh, able to go into the National Assembly. And so when the martial law troops were storming into the building, their staff and the MPs, they set up the chairs and desks and made a blockade. So they were stopping the soldiers' advancement, and they were using their legal rights to hold the National Assembly session that was around 0:21 the next day. It was midnight. So this was a very tense period. So imagine that these, top brand military units, fully armed with helicopters storming in, they were able to stop the MPs. Then MPs would have no sessions, and they could not decide to cancel the martial law. The National Assembly was the last remaining agency, institution that can nullify the martial law of the president. but they succeeded. So around 0:48, the National Assembly plenary session starts, and about 2.5 hours from the proclamation of martial law, it was nullified. So the National Assembly lifted the martial law with their legal means, and President Yoon hesitated 3 more hours and then signed the lift bill of the martial law. So martial law was lifted. That means the military didn't have any authority to move and continue their operations. So these two dramatic, turning points, historical turning points, happened within the span of 5 to 6 years. So who are the ones who stopped this martial law in less than 5 hours? First is the citizens who rushed to the National Assembly in the number of 5 to 6,000. Their quick action. And then opposition parties, they were very quick in gathering inside the National Assembly building with enough numbers. And the MP staff, hundreds of the MP staff, they were able to block the advancement of the top-class military forces and stop them from arresting MPs. And the news, through SNS and independent media, the news spread very fast for voluntary mobilization. Without these factors, I would have not been, I'm not speaking anymore on this session without these forces happening. But it's not the end of the story. The Yoon and his military groups and ministers, they have been planning the martial law and the mobilization of forces for a very long time. But National Assembly, the majority party is the opposition party, the Democratic Party of Korea. So this last institution, they are now being able to hold inquiry sessions. They are being able to press the police and the remaining prosecutors and other inquiry agencies to press for these cases. So testimonies are coming up. And fortunately, a good number of military generals and good number of other members who are part of the mobilization of the military and police forces for the martial law, they are now giving testimonies, not in full scale, but bit by bit. Now we are gathering the whole picture. So on December 7th, the President Yoon was pressed very much to give the first apology. And then we thought, the Democratic forces, we thought we are on the winning side and they are on the retreating side. But there's still the ruling party who has about 105 MPs in the assembly. And we are now seeing new situation, and these conservative MPs, they are getting more united in support of the Yoon. It means that there is a second tide of justifying the proclamation of the martial law and trying to protect President Yoon and martial law leaders from legal prosecutions. But the opposition party pushed for the impeachment of the president, and they needed a few votes from the ruling party, and finally they succeed. They were able to gain enough votes, which is more than 200, to make an impeachment in the National Assembly. Our system is that the National Assembly has to impeach the president first with the majority vote of 2/3 of the National Assembly members, and then bring that case to the Constitutional Court. So now we are in the process of pressing the Constitutional Court to start the investigation and the ruling as soon as possible. But there are some problems of the sufficient number of Constitutional Court judges, which has to be agreed by the ruling party, and the ruling party is still uniting around the president. So there are many hurdles of having successful Constitutional Court. But thanks to the National Assembly inquiry sessions, we are now collecting enough testimonies and enough evidences that this martial law was declared without legal grounds, and the mobilization of forces was also conducted on very much illegal fashion, and the planning and the plotting among the military generals also are very much illegal. So my prospect, and this is shared by majority of the opposition leaders and civil society groups, that eventually in May next year, the latest, the Constitutional Court is very likely to rule for the impeachment, not not dropping the case for the impeachment. So most probably next May or June, we will have a new election for the president, which is direct election. And then we will probably have the new government early in the summer of next year. And the the mood of the people and the public opinion polls show that the next government will be probably coming from the Democratic Party. But that's not the end of the story. Now, the leaders of the coup, they are now resisting and planning very, very carefully to avoid criminal investigation of treason. And this is the main point. And so we have to dig into why this coup, this illegal mobilization of military forces was possible. So let me highlight a few points about the overall picture of this coup. Even though after the democratization process, which came from people's protest and people's power of 1980 and 1987, the civilian control of the military, the parliamentary control of the military, and the people's control of the military is now proven incomplete, insufficient. The military under wrong president, wrong government, was able to plot a massive scale of coup, self-coup, for about 2 years. That's almost as soon as the new government started. And now the new evidence shows that the president expressly kind of induced the planning of the coup since March 2023. And the top leaders of this coup, are now being exposed. They include Minister of Defense and security advisors to the president, and the front line. Front line means, close to DMZ, confronting the North Korean military force. The frontline armored units, they were very active member of this coup, and Joint Chief of Staff, which kind of coordinates all military mobilization in the time of war, and the Ground Force Commander, which commands the entire ground force of South Korean Army, and the Capital Defense Command, which is supposed to defend the capital city of Seoul, and the Military Central Intelligence Command, and also Anti-Espionage Command. This is important. Anti-Espionage Command has the facility of detention, and they have the facility of investigation and torture. So they were part of this coup, and their facility are able to hold up to 1,000 of the detainees, and they prepared that facility for this coup. And also, this team included former dismissed generals who are not supposed to be involved in the military mobilization. So it was illegal, it was partly private, and they included all the best top brand of military forces. The entire military is now, how to say, contaminated by by the wrongdoings of the president and the Minister of Defense. And the coup plan, now we learned that this coup plan included plots to provoke DPRK very specifically with long-range missiles and military drones and long-range gunshots, actually shooting into the territory of DPRK, North Korea, so that DPRK can conduct retaliatory attacks to South Korea's territory. So the war situation breaks out, and this can justify the prolongation of martial law and the mobilization of military forces for the power of the president. And this was, now we are learning that this was part of very well planned coup plan. And we also have strong indications that the top leaders of the ruling political party was aware and they were part of this plot. So the entire the state system has been contaminated by illegal mind and illegal planning led by the wrong president, Yoon. And this was stopped 5 hours of their starting point, which was December 3rd, 1028. And by the remaining forces in the National Assembly, the Democratic politicians, their staff, and the Democratic citizens. So, in a sense, my final synthesis is that, in a sense, South Korea and to a large extent, the world has experienced very significant two historical turning points on December 3rd overnight, including December 4th. And this contest is not over. The coup was immediately stopped, but this contest to demolish the democratic institution by the collusion of military faction and the government faction and the presidential power, this is ongoing. So my very important point from me is that this is an ongoing contest over historical juncture. This juncture will determine the course of, uh, of, of South Korea in the future, but also because South Korea is a very integral part of the global military bloc. South Korea, Japan, US, and South Korea and Indo-Pacific forces now forming a front line against China, Russia, and North Korea. Because South Korea is such an important member of this bloc, this is also a historical contest of epochal nature and of bloc formation and the contest of old hegemony and new hegemony. And on the streets, we also see a change of generation and change of participants of the population. The absolute majority is young female participants. And as you know, majority parts of our democratic movements since 1970s were largely masculine and you know, it has masculine nature and also it has kind of hierarchical nature in it because of historical and cultural background. Now, probably for the first time in massive number, the new historical bloc on the street is fundamentally changing. The leadership is coming from very young and new gender formation. So I'd like to describe this as an epochal, new democratic bloc formation very strongly going on. And this will affect, probably my guess, about several decades from now to the history of South Korea and the region. And why this coup? I think this coup is very well and long planned, but it had many flaws. The military didn't move as planned. So my description of this coup attempt is that this is another repeated, desperate move of the right-wing political groups, which is, in my view, it is manifested in other parts of the world and will be manifested by other parts of the world in a similar fashion. So there is a desperateness of the right-wing groups that they are losing time and they are losing support, popular support, and they're losing their influence. Their hegemonic loss is felt in this failed coup attempt. That's my view. So our people's ability this time, ability to stop the coup, is that this is a serious blow to the norm-based alliances. So I think we have to remember the strategy of the Biden administration of alluring Japan and South Korea's right-wing governments into the de facto military alliance, and which has a global perspective, and they use the term, norm-based diplomacy, norm-based international order, and this norm is supposedly American style, freedom-oriented, liberal democracy. And this liberal democracy-based alliance, this international relations led by Biden administration, it received a serious blow by its own, own colony, so to speak, by his own ally. This is South Korea, Yoon's government. Yeah. So Yoon's government, in fact, betrayed the supreme goal of the US, which is norm-based alliance, by this illegal coup, and they failed it. So in a sense, I think we should interpret and we should anticipate that this will effect a kind of serious blow to the international scheme of the US of this sort. So, in a nutshell, this coup and its failure and the people's power, the politics on the streets, being able to stop it until now, and finally, in a few months, impeach the president again for the second time in short history, will have impacts of many dimensions beyond Korea. So that's my input for today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Francis. That was very insightful, and I think you really started with a very detailed, say, context of what happened on the very crucial moments of this coup. But then you also really painted the more geopolitical picture very wisely and very broadly. And I think, as you mentioned, this is very strategic point in time. Not only for Korea, but I think also for the region, the Southeast and East Asia, where this struggle of power and influence is really happening. I mean, it's already taking some time, and it's already taking, I mean, it's already ongoing for some time, but this event also will most probably also extend the struggle for power in the region. I'm going over to you, Cora, and will you introduce Kaya?
Okay, thanks, Francis, and of course, Kris. Well, let me introduce our next resource person, Kaya VEREIDE. We call her Kaya Curry in Jeju Island. She'd like to be identified as coming from the St. Francis Peace Center international team. So when we invited her, she kind of really told us that she would be speaking from an angle of somebody who is not Korean, but in Korea, and very much in solidarity with the struggles in Korea, in particular in the Gangneung village. And I think that was enough reason for us to be more interested, in the sense that she is in Korea, but she is also coming. She's from the United States. So, and maybe Kaya can tell us more about herself and her work later. But I'm sure that she would have very important commentary speaking after Francis. So, Kaya?
Thank you, Cora, for the kind and very well-focused introduction. Yes, I am living now in Korea, and I've been here for almost 12 years, but I am originally from the United States. And so my perspective on what's happening here is from a standpoint of somebody who is living here and very much affected by everything that's happening in Korea, but with certainly different background and different kind of perspective that I could share. And so, yes, I'm working with the St. Francis Peace Center in Gangjeong, and they support me to work with a variety of different teams that are mostly opposing a Navy base that is here in Gangjeong Village on Jeju Island, South Korea. And this base is a Korean base, but according to the status of forces agreements in Korea, as well as in other countries, the United States military can use this base pretty much as they like. So we often are protesting against US military using this base as part of the increasing militarization of the region, especially causing more and more tensions with China. So that's a little bit of background of where I am. And so I will share my screen and share some slides here. So here on Jeju Island, the memory of martial law is perhaps more intense in a certain way than other parts of Korea, because it was the first instance of martial law in South Korea that the government forces killed over 30,000 people in Jeju. And at that time, the whole island was labeled as a red island, and people were accused of being communists. That was in 1948, and on through the Korean War, those massacres continued. So the idea of martial law is very much tied with violence. As Francis was saying, the last time there was martial law in the 80s was a time also of violence. And so that experience would cause people to fear how this martial law would be used now to have government forces attacking citizens. And also, particularly, I feared if there's martial law, then that must mean that war has broken out between the Koreas, that there was war with North Korea. And so just the word martial law, when I recognized it, I suddenly thought, oh, this is a big outbreak of war. And my initial thought when I saw the president's declaration and his actual statements was relief that, oh, at least war didn't break out yet. Although certainly later we saw more and more news that there very well could have been war breaking out if the coup plotters had been more successful in trying to provoke North Korea. While I was feeling somewhat relieved that the war wasn't breaking out, at least yet, a friend came and banged on my door, and she was worried about people in the Gangjang peace movement who the police were already investigating for our daily protests against the Navy base. And so she wanted to all gather together. And so she convinced me to go, and I was glad to be with other people to see what's happening in the news and to be able to not feel alone in that night where so much was happening. But as happened in Seoul with people getting out into the streets right away, and Francis joining the people who were gathering at the National Assembly, people all around the country were busy working to respond to the declaration of martial law. And here in Gangjang Village, some members of the peace movement drafted a statement opposing the martial law. And so in between the time that the National Assembly made a resolution demanding for the lifting of martial law and the time that Yoon Suk-yeol accepted it, so this is like in between 1 and 4 o'clock in the morning, we put out our statement, and many other organizations were putting out their statement following exactly what was happening in the news and sharing voices from many different perspectives, and putting out public statements to oppose martial law. So I'll read from the second paragraph here. President Yoon Suk-yeol declared emergency martial law. His proclamation to eliminate those who disagree with him by naming them as anti-state forces shows his ignorance of democracy. Just as war divides people into allies and enemies and sets up people who are different as targets that must be killed, Yoon Suk-yeol is attempting to provoke a war that frames citizens as enemies. And so this was part of the statement released by organizations in Gangjang Village. And after the martial law was lifted, we were able to continue our daily protests against the Jeju Naval Base in Gangjang. And so that very next day, we gathered, and our dancing, I feel like, was especially joyous and full of energy because we realized how close we came to losing the ability to speak out and the ability to criticize the government legally, according to Korean law, I suppose. But to have these universal rights recognized by the government is something that I had never really appreciated so much. I think it's easy to take for granted until you realize that you might lose that freedom. And the picture on the top right is from December 4th, the day that the martial law was lifted. That evening, there was a gathering of several hundred people in Jeju City. And those gatherings gradually grew and increased, not only in Seoul, where the biggest part of the population lives, but in many other places around Korea, including here on Jeju Island. People were mainly gathering in Jeju City, which is the biggest city on the island. So some things that have been particularly special to me from what I've seen in the reactions in Korea to martial law are, as I mentioned, the statements being released so quickly by so many diverse organizations. The ability to put into words why martial law is so dangerous and what we must do in order to oppose it and to impeach Yoon Suk-yeol and to build a more just and democratic society. Then there have also been the regular rallies that people have gathered for a couple weeks. It was Tuesday through Saturday in Jeju. People just kept coming back every night, gathering. And at these rallies, people could stand up and give speeches. People could express themselves by what they carried, what they wrote on their picket signs, what they wrote on their flags. You can see in the picture here that people have taken their light sticks, I suppose you call them in English, that are usually used for supporting different K-pop groups. And they added impeachment is the main word that people have added onto these here to make them impeachment light sticks. That's been like a symbol, perhaps, of the rallies. And there has been quite a diverse assortment of activities happening during the rallies and different styles of music, from the traditional pungmul, which is Korean drumming, to older classic protest songs like the March for the Beloved, to more modern K-pop songs, whether that's Into the New World, which has somewhat of a meaning that encourages people to gather together and support each other, or just completely fun dance music like the 아파트 song that is current rage. And another unique thing has been that people who can't join the rallies are giving donations and just paying in advance for especially coffee, but other things as well, that people can pick up on their way to the protest. So this posting here was somebody who said, thank you to everyone who is joining the rally. I also wanted to join, but I couldn't make it. So this is the only way I can contribute. So they paid for a certain number of coffees, and then people joining the protest could just go pick up free coffee in the name of the person who has already paid for it. And there are many examples of this happening during these rallies. And one fun thing on social media recently is the diverse flags that people who aren't already part of an organization, like a trade union or a political party or a club even, that have more formal flags. They're making handmade or professionally printed flags that say things like, the people who just want to eat mandarin oranges at home. So anyway, a big impression to me is this enthusiasm that people are gathering together and expressing themselves and really celebrating their diverse backgrounds within this movement of opposing martial law and calling for impeachment of the President Yoon Suk-yeol. I would like to share a short 2-minute video so you can see some of what the December 14th rally was like in Jeju City. That's the day that the National Assembly passed the vote for impeaching Yoon Suk-yeol. So that's just a taste of one rally here in Jeju. Certainly smaller numbers than happening in Seoul or bigger cities, but it was a very record-setting, and not in all of history, but in recent years, it was record numbers to have over 10,000 people joining in Jeju. And so as the speaker during the march was saying, it's certainly far from finished. There's a lot that people still need to be out in the streets, demanding accountability from the government. And so I'm looking forward to witnessing this historic time period in Korean history, and I hope that people abroad will also keep paying attention and showing support for the Korean people who are standing up for democracy and to oppose martial law. And we should keep paying attention and showing encouragement, but I hope that the Korean movement here will also be inspiring. It's certainly inspiring to me as an American, that I think we would have a lot to learn from Korean people in terms of being right on top of what's happening and being able to respond quickly and put so many diverse perspectives into clear, concise statements, and be out in the street and include so many people in very life-giving gatherings. So I hope that sharing my experience gave you a little bit of a feel of what it's like to be here right now in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaya. That to me is quite a moving presentation. You know, I'm sure you touch everyone's heart through your presentation. And you know, like someone coming from the Philippines, you know, it's actually an experience to be, you know, under martial law regime, and so it's really inspiring at this point to see this happening in Korea, and I hope that a lot more people will continue on joining you in solidarity. At this point, I think I'd like to acknowledge our friends who joined us today. You know, like we have friends from Palestine, you know, Europe, Germany and the Netherlands and UK. We have a friend from Turkey who joined us today. And of course, India and Pakistan and the Philippines, of course, and Colombia as well. So these are the friends who join us today. I don't know who else, but we are online on Facebook and also on YouTube. So I'm sure that this is an important information that could be shared to many of our friends. I'm also very envious about how quick, you know, the people's movement have really, you know, did their part. And to see, as I scanned through the march that you've showed us through the video, it is really very important and inspiring to see young, you know, young people and many women being part of these mobilizations that are going on in Korea. And I guess that also points us the future of what the movement in South Korea will be in the coming years. You know, I think beyond what we see at this point, because witnessing what just happened will be inspiration not only for Koreans, but also for many in other parts of the world. So at this point, I think we are now ready to move on to the next part of our conversation. Would like to try as much as possible to keep this more informal, more you know, interactive. And maybe Kris could shoot the first question.
Yeah, sure. I was let's say Francis, you briefly touched say the importance of the constitutional court in the say in the continuing process. It will take some more months for this investigation. And yeah, as you mentioned, there is also some kind of political struggle on the positioning of the Constitutional Court and especially the judges. Can you briefly explain a bit? Because I try to find some more information about that, but it's not easy to find it in English. So maybe what is exactly going on within the Constitutional Court?
Well, it's a long story, but I need to make it very short.
Yeah,
But
possible.
usually there are 9 members in the Constitutional Court, and they are nominated by ruling party, opposition party, and the president. And the final decision comes from the president. The
Okay.
president is impeached, so the
Yeah.
prime minister is now the acting president. But the prime minister was part of the coup plot himself, very much pro-Yun. So now this acting president, prime minister, has to decide the 3 empty seats in the National Constitutional Court.
Yeah.
And in the existing 6 members, one of them was nominated by President Yoon, and he is believed to be also extremely right-wing. So we have only 5 votes, and we need 6 votes. So for that, we need to nominate 3 empty seats as soon as possible. The prime minister, acting president, is resisting. So there's a discussion whether we should remove this prime minister on the charge of treason first and then nominate the constitutional judges later, or the other way around, because of the speed of the required speed. So that's very complicated.
Could you say that the seats were deliberately kept open? Was that part of a strategy, or is that maybe too much?
That's the skepticism shared by majority of people, that this acting president is deliberately delaying the process.
Yeah. Which of course also will test the people, say, will and say firmness to really keep on pushing for say the impeachment and the trial and the ultimate trial of the president. Yeah. Okay. If you talk about geopolitics, there was also one question on, say, the role of the USA, the US. Do you think that the US was informed about this coup, or at the same time it happened also very unexpectedly? So, what is your assessment of, say, was the US government aware of this? Was there any signal that there was some, let's say, exchange with the, the US diplomacy on this?
Kaya, do you want to say something on this issue first?
Well, I feel like the amount of news that I have followed doesn't give me a clear sense of what's happening behind the scenes. So certainly US officials have said things that don't make them look like they supported the coup, but this is in the aftermath, where I'm curious what would have happened if the coup had progressed. Certainly the history of the United States doesn't point toward any consistency with the supposed values for norms or rules. But the allies of the United States in the past have certainly included many military dictators who came to power through coups. So certainly now that the National Assembly has voted and the President Yoon has accepted their vote, and that on the night of the 4th to lift martial law, and then now with the impeachment proceeding, it would be very unstrategic for the United States to say they had supported martial law.
Mhm.
So whether anything was happening behind the scenes is something I can't really speak to.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Let me add
curious.
from what I know. By structure, the U.S. forces in Korea and the Korean forces, they are under the command of joint commandship. And of course, the intelligence capacity of the U.S. is the leading part. South Korea is a very small subsidiary part in terms of intelligence. So from space and from high altitude, we should probably deduce that all the information in the Korean Peninsula, land, sea, and air are monitored by these U.S. forces. This coup was massively planned and long-term planned. So there were many, many movements of massive number of Korean armed forces involved over the past 12 or 18 months. So the only rational conclusion is that U.S. could not have not known. It's impossible that U.S. did not know.
Mhm.
It is impossible. But we don't have any, hard evidence or direct information from behind. And the only kind of evidential issues that I can give you as information is that this U-2 reconnaissance aircraft, right? High altitude U-2, the US, which collects all the information. Now on December 18th, they were flying very low altitude, not over North Korea, but over South Korea. So they were monitoring very close to some movements happening on the South Korean soil.
Mhm.
And that happened twice in December. So that's, I think, and that was known to the media. So I think that was kind of message from the US forces to the Korean forces that you are under our watch.
Much. Mhm.
Yeah. So don't make any move. And then diplomatically, there were twice or three times clear message from Washington that everything should be settled according to the Constitution and law of the
Mhm.
Republic of Korea. So we interpret that message that the U.S. didn't support this coup.
No.
But that's only interpretation,
Yeah.
and we don't have hard evidence.
Mhm. And if you look at the role of, say, the conglomerates, so I mean, Korea has some big companies that we all know worldwide. Did I mean, was say big business, let's say, open for this coup, or did they really remain, say, off hands, or was there any reaction from their side?
There was no
And
direct
also, I mean,
open.
and somehow are they a bit more close to the, say, conservative Yoon?
Naturally, and by this family and marriage links, this many members of the big conglomerates, they are close to the members of the prosecution, and Yoon is from the prosecution.
Yeah.
So this is a long-term power elite structure, prosecutors, lawyers, and judges, and conglomerates members through marriages. So this is a fact. But the behavior of Yoon and this coup, by any standard, would be beneficial to the big business of South Korea, which is already anticipating huge challenge from Trump in power. So, and there was no open and clear message from any of the big business in support of Yoon or support of coup during this time. But there was also, of course, no clear opposition messages.
Mm.
And so, because of this big economic crisis faced by big business under Trump era, the rational interpretation would be that big business was not happy about this coup.
Mm. Yeah. So after all this, I mean, I hear you say that this coup was quite unexpected, and maybe although it was already prepared for some time, at the end it was a bit, let's say, in a hurry. I'm done in a hurry, and not really, let's say, in consultation with important parties that could have supported more clearly and openly the coup. Yeah, yeah. So it was rather a political move from the president, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Desperate. That's why I mentioned desperateness in
yeah,
this coup.
yeah. Yeah, Kaya, there was Francis mentioned about let's say kind of regeneration of activists, people coming to the streets. Did you also feel that in the actions that you participated, or were there like new people joining the demonstrations at these crucial times?
Yes, there are definitely more young people joining in than a other rally that I've participated in, which would be something more related to opposing a second airport on Jeju, or these kind of issues related to like the Jeju Navy base, and even something like the Queer Pride Parade is much smaller numbers gathering together, but the number of young people who are coming out this time is certainly impressive. Although a lot of the people who are coming out this time also came out and also felt very much connected with the struggle for truth and for government responsibility, and for response to the Sewol Ferry tragedy. And that was a big part of the movements calling for the impeachment of Park Geun-hye government. And so the people who were involved then have experience and are maybe a little bit more comfortable joining again this time. And kids who were joining as middle schoolers then are high school age now. And if they were high school then, they're in college now, or that age. And so I think, to me, that youthful energy, this time I've seen more older generations who are following along the trends of the younger generations more actively, is a very positive sign of more intergenerational understanding. That's a positive sign I've seen this time.
Okay, nice. Cora, did you see any question that?
I think our friends who joined us today kind of also connect this situation in South Korea with the current developments, particularly, for example, in Bangladesh, where martial law was also declared. And also we get a question also from a comment, I think, about relating it, for example, with the developments in Colombia, saying that they are in particular moving towards neutrality, that concept. And her question was that, is this something that rings, positively with our Korean comrades? Those are the ones I saw in the Q&A box. So maybe either Francis and Kaya could respond to those.
The points from Cora, as you synthesized the chat box, was not very clear to me, but I will try to link with our previous discussion. Yoon came to presidency with very narrow margin, like 0.7%. And this narrow margin, majority of this narrow margin for Yoon came from actually young male voters. Usually, the young generations, whether male or female, they vote more for Democrats than to conservatives. And this time, the young males, they switched side by enough margin so that Yoon became president. Why? Because Yoon was using the anti-feminist and anti-gender equality agenda to attract young males who are, disenchanted from the loss of jobs and loss of opportunity, and they relate that to gender equality issues. And many of the young males who are adhering to anti-feminist discourses, they attach themselves to the Yoon's election agenda. So that was very crucial. And then the Yoon's president's ruling style, we begin to learn from his office that it's very much macho, patriarchal, masculine style, unable to sympathize with the pains and difficulties of people, unable to sympathize with the new cultural trends. And he was very, very rude to the hundreds of young people who were crushed to death during Halloween party. Was it 2 years ago? He was very rude to that kind of disasters, even though he was responsible as a president. So there was a huge alienation of young people from their initial fascination to President Yoon. So I think the rise of young female activism on the streets represents many, many very important things. It was kind of testifying of the failure of conservative politics, the Korean conservative politics in dealing with, gender issues and their scheme of, using gender issues to win more votes from young males, etc. And I think the loyalty from the military for the coup was really low compared to previous coup and martial law. I think this should be also very important. The uh, the 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 mechanism and the mobilization of military is not the same as previous coup. They are not as loyal to the president's decree as before. They need some kind of persuasion. Many soldiers and officers, they hesitated in aggressive actions that they should have taken by order. They hesitated on the spot. This delayed the progress of the use of force. So in many ways, the conservative strategy showed a big failures, and the the best manifestation is that the unorganized, voluntary, self-mobilizing young generations and pouring into streets, and they really don't enjoy the organization of rallies by old style NGOs. They don't enjoy that. They don't go there. So they organize their own ways of songs and dances and this, electric lights and movements. And for example, in one rally for 3 hours, I couldn't sing a single song, protest song, because all songs were from K-pops, and the, my generation was lost on the streets. We are kind of doing silent protest while everybody was shouting around me. So, this is symbolic, but I think this is really, how to say, future foretelling. Foretelling. This is symbolic and foretelling where progressives are being reformed and rebuilt.
So somehow the school is also a bit a blessing for a regeneration of activism. If you want to look at from the positive side, then might be like one positive outcome. But the point of neutrality, I mean, I think our friends from Colombia, they were a bit pointing at, yeah, the concept of neutrality, yeah, in this polarizing world, is the concept of neutrality also attractive as a concept for Korea? Do you think because with North Korea so close and China and the US bases, can we imagine a neutral South Korea?
Well, may I speak first, Kaya?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Because of the division and because of the confrontation and because of the alliance with the US, South Korea, etc., neutrality is very, very unpopular term, and I'm one of the very, very few minority campaigners for neutrality.
Okay.
It's almost impossible to put into the agenda of the existing political parties. The major opposition party, Democratic Party, is not willing to discuss this as their policy. It's a very difficult terrain. But because of the South Korea's direct and indirect involvement in Ukraine war by sending, weapons, ammunitions, and supporting the U.S., etc., etc., this agenda is potentially a crucial agenda, and some of the very few peace movement groups are trying to make this agenda alive. So in a sense, our colleagues from Colombia, I hope that we can, develop this agenda as a global and powerful agenda together. But South Korea is experiencing a very difficult context to discuss this.
Sure. Kaya, do you want to add something to that?
It's not quite an issue of neutrality, but the current Yoon administration has been pursuing alliance with Japan and the United States, whereas the Democratic Party is very critical of that kind of just overlooking and ignoring the history of the Japanese colonial oppression of South Korea. And so the demand for historical justice and reparations is something that they emphasize as a reason to not just jump into this expanding military alliance. Whereas their acceleration of alliance and war games with the United States was maybe just a little bit slower. But I wouldn't say that it was in the realm of neutrality, which is something that is certainly something that people talk about here in the peace movement against the Gangjung naval base, but it's not nearly as mainstream of a topic. So hearing about countries that have kicked out the United States military is very inspiring to the peace movement here, but we are much smaller numbers that are not popular enough yet.
We're almost moving towards the end of our conversation today, and we have a couple of questions or comment here, and I think at this point, if one is, do you think the U.S. policy regarding Korea will change under Trump? And the other question is, would you share power of democratic forces more? I'm not quite sure what, such as unions, professional organizations, NGOs. How powerful is their connection with society? So those are two final questions that I see in our chat box. And at this point, it would be good to, request from Francis and Kaya to give us some, closing remarks or concluding remarks. And of course, including their responses to those two questions.
Yes, I will go first. Yes, Trump administration means a lot to Korea, like many other countries. And uh, one of the key issues would be that reshuffling of the military power combination between US forces and South Korea, less US forces and more South Korea, for example, is on the horizon. And that will open a very tragic door for discussing the possibility of South Korea going nuclear weapons. South Korea has capital, technology, and all the infrastructure to produce nuclear weapons in a matter of few months. So this would be one of the key issues, that South Korea may be on the front line of the expansion of nuclear weapons in Asia. That's a possibility. The public opinion is still largely against it. But the reshuffling of the balance between U.S. forces and South Korea is one of the agenda of the Trump, and so I'm very worried about that. Economically, I think South Korea will face very serious economic turn down, and the global influence of the conglomerates like Samsung, Hyundai, Kia, and others will be less on the Trump administration. That means the South Korea's ability to maneuver independently in international relations will be less and less under Trump administration, and that will also influence to the democratic space we are having domestically. It will influence negatively. So this combination of security and economic pressure from the US will create a very significant negative wave of squeezing democratic space. So if we have not stopped this coup, then probably the democracy in South Korea could have been crushed during Trump administration. Now we have a few small breathing space because we stopped the coup. What will happen depends on how we, maneuver with little resources.
Kaya?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I didn't feel like Harris offered a much better alternative when it comes to peace in Korea. Certainly, the unpredictability of a Trump presidency is something that through the uncertainty it causes makes much worse possibilities seem more imaginable, which is scary. There were people approaching me in Korea who wanted me to vote for Trump because they thought he was a peace candidate. And so I don't know that I can express exactly all of their reasoning for that attitude, but the idea that Trump could be open to negotiating with North Korea again was enough that some people were
Mhm.
calling him more likely to build peace in Korea. But there's certainly a lot more that the United States has been doing, and including under the last Trump presidency, that makes me worry a lot for what will happen in Korea as well as in the United States under Trump again.
Mhm.
I noticed in the chat the idea of neutrality, clarification that at least when I was talking about neutrality, I was thinking about being neutral in between US hegemony and China hegemony and trying to find a middle path. There's certainly other aspects of the word neutrality that can mean just being silent when violence is carried out by those with power. And that's not what I was referring to. I think from the context, we could get that, but it's also good to note how neutrality can be used in other contexts.
Indeed. Also the non-violent, in fact, resistance that you together with so many people showed in South Korea. Yeah. Okay. I think we have to close the webinar here. Thanks a lot, Kaya and Francis, for this very insightful, sharing of your opinions and expressions and analysis. That was very interesting for people who are not so deep into, say, the Korea Peninsula issues, struggles. I think it's also a nice, say, closing of the year, because at this point in time, I mean, the response of the people was so sharp and so edgy that, in fact, the coup d'état or you were able to stop the president's plans, and now we will have to see how this soap will end. But hopefully, the Korean soap will have a a good ending by getting rid of this president, and then then it will be up to the people again to make a choice in the next elections, what type of president they want, and the options will be open. But I think it's clear that Yoon and his Goonies have really a bit let's say used the tactic of scorch earth, and maybe they also burned themselves here. So there is I think there is an open road for more new progressive policies. And it was very nice to have this sharing with you. Also, thank you, Cora, for early waking up in Canada, and thanks a lot, Kaya and Francis, for staying awake late for us. It's already getting late, and we are also all getting a bit in the Christmas mood. But I hope we can, despite all the tension and all the conflicts that are going on, we can still celebrate also in peace the next coming days. And we're looking forward to meet you all next year for our next webinars that will come up with AEPF. So thanks a lot, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, AEPF.